You are listening to Let's Talk Trio on podcasts. Keep up with the latest episodes by downloading the Podbean app or stream episodes via our social media accounts. Search for Let's Talk Trio on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. This episode is sponsored by StudentAccess. StudentAccess, the leader in Trio software. StudentAccess is an online database solution that allows Trio programs to track their students' information, connect with students by text messages, streamline the APR, and work from anywhere, all online, with automatic updates for changes from the Department of Education. Their technical support team includes former Trio staff and has over 50 years of combined experience working with Trio. Make it easier to focus on your priority, the students. For more information and to request a free demo, visit their website at www.studentaccess.com or call them toll-free at 1-800-801-1232. That website again is www.studentaccess.com or 1-800-801-1232. Be sure to share your favorite episodes on your social media by tapping that share button. This is a great way to support the podcast. Now here's your host, Juan Rivas.
Thank you, Amelia, for that wonderful introduction. Hello, listener, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Trio. This is Season 6, Episode 20. I am your host, Juan Rivas. In today's episode, we have Kellyann Weber, Trio Upward Bound Director at Clovis Community College in New Mexico. Kellyann is on the podcast to share her educational journey, her professional experience, and how she found her calling serving Trio. So coming up in just a bit, Kellyann Weber. A heartfelt thanks to our individual supporters, Angelica Vialpando, Rosario Riley, Dr. Ryan Barone, Dr. Jamie Motley, Dr. Jeff Nepute, Angelica Valdez, Felicia Rivera, Eric LaMaster, and Jaded Electronics. Thank you to our corporate sponsors, TrioJoblist.com, NOSOTROS Education Center, TheTrioStore.com, powered by Proforma. Visit www.thetriostore.com, your source for Trio graduation stoles. And StudentAccess. Thank you all so much for your continued support of this podcast. You too can be a sponsor of the podcast. Head on over to Patreon and search for Let's Talk Trio. Choose one of 4 patron levels. You can support this podcast for as little as $1 a month. If you own a business and would like to run an ad on our podcast, send us an email at letstalktrio@gmail.com for details. Become a supporter with a one-time donation to the podcast business PayPal account. Our business handle is @LetsTalkTrio. Your support helps us lift Trio voices. If you would like to nominate a participant, staff, or alumni to be on the podcast, send us an email at letstalktrio@gmail.com. That email again is letstalktrio@gmail.com. Again, a great episode featuring Kellyann Weber, Trio Upward Bound Director at Clovis Community College in New Mexico. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode.
Hi, Trio Nation. My guest on the Let's Talk Trio podcast is the director of the Clovis Community College Trio Upward Bound program in Clovis, New Mexico. She graduated from Metropolitan State University in Denver with a bachelor's in psychology and obtained her master's from CSU Global in organizational leadership. In her free time, my guest enjoys community choir, spending time with her animals, cycling, and community events with her staff and friends. Welcome to the podcast, Kellyann Weber. Kellyann, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Juan. I'm glad to be here.
You are in Clovis, New Mexico. That used to be my former hometown. How are things in Clovis, New Mexico?
They're actually really good. You know the weather here, so it's still dry.
Very dry. Yeah.
That's just how it is. I added a foster dog. She's now mine. I've completed the process. So,
nice.
New puppy, all that fun stuff.
Gotta know what's the name of the puppy?
Her name is Tay.
Tay. Oh, awesome. So I was doing a little bit of research on you. I learned that you're from Colorado, which is amazing because this interview is like we switched places. You're now in New Mexico. I was formerly in New Mexico, came to Colorado. And I just, how awesome is that? Like I said, I'm from the area of New Mexico. I moved to Colorado about 8 years ago. What are you enjoying most about New Mexico?
Well, so I will say, because I'm always going to compare it to Colorado. But I like the small little community feel, which I wasn't sure how that would feel coming from Denver and being in a big city. I will always be a big city girl at heart.
Mhm.
But I like my little community here. It is pretty here. I do live in the Brown area where it's just dry. But this is where I'm supposed to be.
What do you miss about Colorado? Because you're formerly from here, so is there anything that you miss from here?
Well, yes. So I miss the ease of being able to go see like concerts and shows because you could just go right to downtown Denver and that's like 15 minutes. Whereas
Hmm.
I have to plan and go, okay, if I'm going to Texas, I've got 2 hours plus the time change, etc.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and then the other thing I do miss is like you could just hop into the mountains with in very little time. Whereas where I live now, it's going to take obviously more time, but also more planning to determine like where I'm going to go and that kind of
Right.
deal. Not the end of the world, but
Right,
it
right,
just
right.
doesn't have the same ease as Colorado.
So long as you're planning and making sure everything is within your timeline, you can get to Albuquerque, you can get to Roswell, some of the Texas cities, like you said, so long as you factor in the time change, that also works too. But I will agree with you, the mountains out here in Colorado, that's what caused me to fall in love with Colorado in the first place, is just the mountain ranges out here are very, very beautiful.
It is.
So during the intro, I noted in your notes that you love singing and cycling as well. How did you get into that?
So I started singing a long time ago. My initial goal was to sing opera.
Oh.
And so my mom was like, if this is what you want to do, then let's get you in voice lessons. I also did choir and I don't think I started it in middle school. That was more instrumental side.
Hmm.
But once high school hit, I was singing in multiple choirs, doing musicals. I've always just liked that. That's like the artsy part of who I am. And like once life plans and things changed, I wanted to make sure that that was something I continued doing because I do enjoy singing. I sing in a community choir right now. And truthfully, every place I've lived, I've tried to find one, and I've
Hmm.
been lucky enough to be able to do that. And so in terms of like cycling, that I'm trying to think of when specifically that happened. I started getting
Hmm.
into it right when the pandemic hit, because I got a indoor bike, and I just really like it. It's low pain on my joints because aging is fun. And so,
Tell me
and
about it.
I'm like, I used to do running and do like long relay races, and then my knees and joints just can't do it anymore. But I still
Mm.
like that active part of feeling good and that kind of deal. So it's kind of progressed because I used to lift hardcore back in the day too.
Oh,
But I'm like, I'm getting older, things are hurting. Let's still be active and do the fun things that I like to do, just in a different avenue.
absolutely. So tell me more about you. What is something people may not know about you on just kind of straight away?
So I initially went to college to sing opera and I started at CSU Fort Collins. And I was also young, and I think this is also how a lot, and we see that with our students too, where they're like, I'm going to be famous. And
Hmm.
then life changes, and it's not so much that it's bad, it's just different. Um,
Certainly.
so I was studying music at CSU. A faculty member was had told me that I was not good enough to be a vocal performance
Oh
major,
no,
and
I'm
I
sorry to hear
believed
that.
her.
Hmm.
Um, However, it catapulted me to a different place that I didn't even know existed. So albeit that was pretty devastating, I got to do such cool things once I transferred to Metro. It was it was not a university at that time when I transferred, but um when I went there, I was able to do like research, which I was like, this is super cool. I didn't even know like I liked this much. And
Hmm.
obviously we do lots of research when we're in college and things like that. But being within it and experiencing it is a different story. And I got to present at conferences, well, specifically a site conference. And that I think just ties into like my leadership fun stuff that I like to do. And then I also like to dance. I just don't do a whole lot of it here, but I took salsa back in the day and I was like, this is so fun. And
Mhm.
so I dabble in it a little bit, but like remember, I live in the middle of nowhere, so there's no salsa clubs. So
I'm sorry.
dang it.
So yeah, darn it. So let's go back and talk a little bit about that presentation at the psychology conference, because I think when students when you're a student at that point, you were looking at uh, a possible career path. You're looking at ways to engage. What was it about that specific conference that helped you realize like this research is fun?
So I will say that kind of ties into it. I had a fabulous psychology professor, and she was a learning psych. And how the even conference came to be, she
Mhm.
literally was like, "Girl, you're going to be my research assistant." And I told her, I don't know what you're talking about. I've never heard of this or done it. And I think I even told her, I was like, "Girl, I'm not good at this." Like I was struggling in statistics at the time. I was struggling in her psych of learning class. And I was like, "You want me to be your RA? Like, how can I do that?"
Mhm.
And so through my time as a research assistant, we had published a paper, um, because I wasn't just the only research assistant, it was her and multiple research assistants. And they happened to hold a site conference at Metro. And
Mhm.
as part of, and I don't know if it was specifically part of my research assistant class or however, I think it was probably tied to that, but I think it was also just like we had published a paper and the expectation was that you would present at that site conference. I will say that I remember being very nervous. I don't
Mhm.
think I had ever presented research before. And I remember standing in the classroom and sometimes the settings, and you guys have seen that as far as, and like you've seen it as far as when you're at conferences and research conferences that they'll have the big posters up. And it was kind of like that, but not really. But I remember we were in a classroom and I just stood in front of a bunch of people that I didn't know because they came across the state. It wasn't just Metro State that was there. And it was very good practice, albeit I didn't see it then, but like as far as public speaking and being brave, um, and really showcasing what you did as far as
Mhm.
like research is concerned.
Mhm. I also noticed that your previous work experience was involved in education, so kind of a nice little segue. What
Yes.
did that experience teach you?
So I will say it showed me that like where there is a will, there's a way. And I think that's also my attitude anyway. Um, I was working as a teacher's assistant, and that was with minority students that lived unlike I had, albeit I was raised by a single mom. We were very lucky
Mhm.
um, to not have to, I guess, okay, so in terms of an experience for me, it was that I was visiting students that lived in mobile homes or in places that were not what I had seen
Mhm.
in my experience thus far.
Mhm.
And that there were students that were like, well, I'm gonna do what I need to do so that I can get through school. And that even though predicaments may be what they are, that most people and students alike will figure out how to persevere and get through that to attain what they want.
Absolutely. What are some of your goals for the rest of 2024? We're already in
Ooh,
October, but we
I
only have like
know.
2 months left.
That's okay. Uh, the year's been going fast anyway.
Yes,
It can slow
agreed.
down a little bit. But I think this year's been pretty transformative for me. So I want to still seek and find joy in all the little things. I want to start working out. I actually started back up again yesterday.
Oh,
I was
good.
like doing vacation stuff and conference. And so I want to get back into like where have specific set times. And then I want to pay down debt because sometimes I like to buy things that I don't necessarily need. Um,
We all go through that, right?
I know, I'm like, stop it, girlfriend, you don't need that. And then reduce screen time because I've noticed that I'm on my phone quite a bit, whether it's playing games or TikTok, which eats up a huge amount
Oh
of
gosh. Yeah.
but I use it as an entertainment factor, as I'm sure most people do. It helps you kind of check out. So, but I'm like, that doesn't mean that you have to be on it a lot of the time.
Absolutely. Let's take a moment to reflect and think about the journey that has brought you to this point. Can you talk to us about you and your family and where did you grow up?
Sure. So my family is quite small. It's been just my mom and I. Now I do have an uncle, cousins, and then some great uncle and cousins as well. But as far as just in the nuclear family, it's been my mom and I. My uncle and my cousins live in Utah. They used to live in Colorado and then moved. Um, I was raised by a single, fiercely independent mother. Um, and I will say that in terms of who I am today, that everyone says I'm pretty much a spitting image of my mother. It's true. But she's silly and fun and all that other stuff. But she's taught me like she did everything like housewives. And so I'm like, okay, I can figure this out. And then if I can't, I'll hire out. It's not a big deal. I grew up in Denver, Colorado, not in downtown or anything like that. I don't even know if you would call it like a suburb, like it was right in between of like Lakewood, Littleton, uh,
Mm-hmm.
something right there. And then um, I I will say I am pretty stubborn and rarely ask for help. However, this year has been very different because I needed a lot of help. Um, so that was I think that was probably a pretty good as far as forcing me to develop myself in terms of that and accepting help. But I will say like having grown up with an independent mom and saying like just get whatever you want, go get it. That it demonstrated to me like be brave, go do places and go to places that you never thought. I up and moved into Pennsylvania years ago with nobody
Wow.
there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and just doing something, whether I was with someone or not, because sometimes that can determine whether you do what you really want or not.
Mm-hmm.
And like I went through a pretty big life change recently, and that having community and asking for help is human and it's totally okay. And it doesn't make you lesser of a person or anything like that. It just means you're in need of additional emotional support.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How would your family describe you?
I would say that they would describe me as driven, resilient, and silly. Um, Once I set my mind to something, I'm just going to do it. Resiliency has been developed over time, and I my poor staff even knows I'm crazy silly all the time.
Now, why those characteristics in specific? What do you feel like you resonate with a lot of the attributes that they've given you?
I would say so. Um, like driven totally, because I just go, go, go. I do have a hard time just stopping and settling. I usually put a lot of things on my plate, uh, even though I should probably say no. But I'm also like, what if I miss out on something? So there's also that aspect of it. What is it? The FOMO.
FOMO, if you're
So
missing out. Yeah.
yeah. So I think that's also a part of it. And like I'm just silly and awkward. I don't know if I think it's just, like life is the way that it is, and sometimes it's not all sunshine and roses. And if there's something to break up the ridiculousness of it. I think it makes life a little easier to tackle and to, keep going through positively.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor.
Are you seeking guidance to enhance your TRIO project's effectiveness and success? Look no further. NOSOTROS Education Center, NEC, is here to empower your TRIO project with expert consulting services. NEC's mission is to promote the effectiveness and impact of TRIO programs. Since 2003, NEC has specialized in providing professional development and in-service staff trainings, allowable cost services, for TRIO projects across the country. The team at NEC, with over 60 years of combined TRIO experience, offers customized workshops and seminars for project staff, compliance assessments, external evaluations, working on and submitting APRs, database customization and training, development of policies and procedures manuals, and project implementation or reorganization services. Additionally, NEC has secured over $774 million in federal funding with a 92% success rate through their live and on-demand proposal workshops, assistance with data collection and review, detailed technical reviews, and comprehensive proposal development services. Join the hundreds of colleges, agencies, and TRIO projects across the country who benefited from NEC's expertise. NOSOTROS Education Center, your partner in TRIO's project success. Visit their website at nosotros.edu.org. Again, that's nosotrosedu.org.
And now, back to the podcast.
Do you recall what you felt about school, whether it's elementary, middle school, or high school?
Sure. I will say I've always loved school. I was what would be labeled as a teacher's pet. Now, I will say it's because I loved school and I loved my teachers. I loved almost all my teachers. And I think I just was receptive to it. And so then teachers were like, oh, this girl loves to learn. What can we do? And so let's see. So for elementary and middle school, I went through and experienced a lot of teasing. I had braces. It's pretty much stopped now, but like back in the day, people who wore glasses, they would say things about that.
Sure,
and, and albeit that wasn't fun, but it is what it was. I've worn glasses since I was 3. I can't change it. I had a stroke when I was born, so it affected my sight, but that was it. But I'm like, I can't help it. I have a cross eye, kids. Leave me alone. I need glasses to see. And so as far as like middle school, that wasn't very fun. I'm sure it's not for many people. That's when a lot of the teasing and things was pretty high, but my mom is awesome and advocated for me and worked with the school and teachers, so that got fixed pretty quickly. And I will say, and thank goodness my mom told me, she said that school was always before boys and that school is my job. And I will say that it has served me very well.
Very good.
Having done that in that order. And so when that's what she said, and so that's what I did. Any opportunity that presented itself, I did it. Like I loved to write when I was younger, and I would write poems all the time. And so I entered a poetry writing contest and placed and got to publish it. It was the coolest and it literally wasn't like what you think of like publishing. I think we cut out pieces of cardboard and I covered it in cloth and then like bound it somehow. I don't know, whatever they had me do in elementary school. I'm sure I had plenty help because that's not even in my wheelhouse. I don't know if I could do it now. And then high school, I started at a hybrid trade school because I was like, okay, I'm ready to go. Let's go. And as I was there and seeing who the students were there that were there, they were probably more geared towards trades. And there's nothing against it, but I knew that what I wanted to do was not going to be trade specific. So I said, "Hey mom, I think I'm in the wrong place." And so midway through the year, we took care of that and I transferred to like my home high school. That's in my neighborhood. So I did commute quite far for that. I had to ride a bus. I still rode the bus, but that was the public bus to the home high school and switched there. And then I was like, you know what? You are so smart, Kellyann. You should take AP and X courses right away. Now, was that a little too extra? Yes.
For the audience, can you define what is APX?
Okay, I'm
What is that?
sorry.
Yeah,
So
no, go for it.
there was, so AP, of course, was like advanced placement, and then they would also have, I think they were called X courses, and so they were like accelerated.
Ah,
So, and I don't even know if that term, like I don't use it in my job, so I don't know if that term even still exists back in my alma mater. But they just were accelerated, little harder, that I was influenced to take. And I was like, okay, girl, if you're going to college, you better take the harder classes to show that you have the rigor. So I took that right away, and I will say I struggled. I took I think it was AP British Lit. That was very, very tricky. The teacher was very interesting, and eclectic might be the best word.
eclectic. Okay.
Yeah, he was a different cookie. I don't really know. But like he was beloved, on like everyone on the campus loved him. And I remember one time he said, he was like, think outside the box, because I was not doing well in that class. I was struggling. And I thought outside the box and wrote different stuff, and I finally like got a good grade. So I was like, okay, you can do this. But but looking back, like I didn't need to take all the X and AP courses. I still would have been fine, and I still would have went to college. It would have been fine. And I will say, like, I loved high school so much. I performed so much. I was in the top choir. And then once you were in the top choir, they expected you to be in other choirs. So by the time
Oh,
it was senior year, I was in top choir, the women's choir. I think I did one more. And then I was in production class, which was drama. And so I was just performing, which was plays, musicals, and I was a busy bee, but I had so much fun. It was fabulous.
wonderful. What was your favorite subject at that time?
Well, obviously choir, because it's fun. But I will say, because I still loved academics, was English. Um, I could write. I liked writing, and then reading has always been a fun, not so much escape, but it's an experience where you can go to different places. Um, and creative writing is where I literally would just write and write and write. And it was all about random stuff, and it was just fun. It was I can't think of the word, but it's just like where things just flow out. So
Mhm.
um that was pretty much it. So English and writing.
What was your favorite memory from childhood?
Ooh, okay. It's hard to put it like just to one.
Hmm.
Um, so I it was with my mom. Um, I will, and I still talk to it. I even took my students to this place when we went and visited, but we would my favorite thing was going to Waterworld and to
Oh,
go to
nice. Yeah.
swings. Yeah, I love Waterworld. I like we took the kids there, and I was like, we're going to Waterworld. Sorry, but that's my jam. So like hanging out in pool, like in the water and that kind of deal.
Hmm.
And going on adventures. I don't have any problem riding water slides, but I will not do roller coasters. My staff doesn't get it. I don't either, but that's just how it is.
Absolutely. So, what was education something your family valued? And I know that this is a question about like values of education and how it was enforced, but yeah, we want to hear from you about how your family valued education.
Yes. My mom drilled ed into me from a very young age, and I can't tell you how young, but she was like, you're going to go to college. You're going to do well at college and that kind of deal. And then I will say, like, even when my mom was working, she took night classes. And so I was doing homework while she was in her night classes. So I think also seeing her want to do better and learn more, I think also helped me go, oh, this is super cool. I can do this as well. And I think why my mother pushed it so much was she was almost ready to graduate from high school and she dropped out. And she said, I'm gonna go work and be rich. Or, like, I'm gonna make all this money, as most of us do as we're younger. So she was super close to graduation, and she found her way to Emily Griffith, which I think still exists in Denver. And they obviously I can't even tell you, like, my mom has worked at well, she's retired now, but she worked at the phone company. So whatever they taught her, my mom said she typed on a bunch of keys on this contraction.
Wow. Yeah.
So while she was at Emily Griffith, they said, listen, you're super close, just go finish. And so I think she always told me that story a lot. And I think that was to say, like, if you just do what you need to do right off the bat, it'll likely make your life easier and you'll get to your destination either like a little easier or a little quicker. And so I think like I said, she just wanted me to not have to go through that, not so much the same experience, but an experience like that where you're going, okay, I'm going to go this direction, and then it shifts and then it backtracks and things like that. And I will say that woman talked to me about school from early on. She was like, where do you want to go to college? She said, I'd prefer it be in Colorado, so you'd have in-state tuition. But you're going to go to college. We'll figure out how you get there. And that kind of deal. So, and I did stay in Colorado, change schools, but I stayed.
Right. Awesome. What do you recall about your journey through high school? What do you remember most about this time?
So, in production class, we did, I don't know, it was, I call it like an acting short, but they were like super short little quips. So it was like groups of like 3 to 5 students, and it would be like 15, 20 minutes. Then the next one would go on and the next one would go on. And at that time, my favorite movie was Superstar, which I know.
Really?
Yeah, it makes me old. So people can look it up, but it's back in the day.
It doesn't feel like it was released that long ago, though.
I know it doesn't either, but like I'm thinking back and I'm like, I think it was, but time is weird.
I think for most of us, when somebody says 30 years ago, I still think 1970s.
Yeah, but it's not.
It's not, right. 30 years ago was 1990s.
Yeah. Nope. And trickery is what that is. But yeah, no, that's true. So like at that time, Superstar was my jam. I literally watched that over and over. I loved Mary Catherine Gallagher. That was her stage name. Her real name is Molly Shannon. And so we were doing rehearsals and that kind of deal. And the drama teacher said, like, as part of like my monologue or towards the end, that I should flash the audience. Okay, it was my senior year. Now, obviously, I wasn't going to show anything. It was my senior year. And I looked this woman in the face and I said, I would like to walk at graduation. So are you going to have a talk with the principal? Because I am walking. Okay?
Right.
Like, I think this would be hilarious. I'm a funny lady too, but like, are you serious? And she goes, Kellyann, it'll be fine. I'm like, okay, Miss Compton. Like, okay. You better have my back.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And so I just I wore a swimsuit top. So like everything was fine in terms of that. And I didn't tell my mother. I told her that there was a surprise, and that I hope that she won't disown me and that she'll still
Oh
see me
no.
as her super smart, awesome daughter.
Yeah.
And so like we did the short, I did it, and like they were serving popcorn and it was in the hallway, like the big massive hallway in high schools that you can think of, like in their main building. And like I just did it, and people dropped their popcorn. There was a gasp. And I literally waited till the principal came up to me because I was like, please let me walk. Please let me walk. Please just blame my drama teacher. Like
Hmm.
this was her idea. And she came up to me and she was like, Kellyann, that was pretty dang funny. And I said, so I'm good to go to graduate. And she said, yes. She goes, you weren't inappropriate. But she goes, we did not expect that at all. And I said, that was the whole point, was the little shock factor. Uh,
Absolutely.
so it was just funny and we laughed so hard. It was a blast.
Wow. So this next question, because it sounds like you were super busy with extracurricular activities, what other things were you like involved in? How did you keep yourself so busy?
Uh Performing. Like that's all I did. I remember because I was in three choirs in production class. One was all that jazz and that was the top choir. Um we were singing at nursing homes. We would go to the Shakespeare Festival. We were singing
Hmm.
there. I was also acting there with the production class. Uh and like I was just I did a choir cruise one year. Like it was just one thing after the other.
Hmm.
I also think it was my mom's ploy to make sure I didn't do drugs. But she was like, I'm going to keep you busy so you stay out of trouble. Uh,
Yeah.
but like it was just a lot of practicing and performing. Like one year I did a choir cruise, so there was performing and practicing that had to be tied to that because albeit it was like a fun cruise, we were still expected to perform and
Hmm.
did. Um and and like it it was just it was just a blast and it was awesome, but it was literally all music and all mainly music and drama. I was, of course, doing NHS. I was also in Key Club, which I was an officer in. This is when I prefaced like I do too much. So I was just a little busy bee, and thank goodness I hadn't started working yet, or I think I maybe had started um, working part-time, but I literally was like get up, get your act together. Like during lunch, sometimes I would do homework. I know when I had my part-time job, I was doing homework on my lunches, uh,
Hmm.
just to like stay on top of everything. And that way I could still sleep and that kind of deal. So I was running and going, but it was a blast.
Wow. It sounds like you were very, very busy. Go, 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 Monday through Friday, even on some of the weekends.
Yes, yeah, because a lot of like performances and things were on the weekends, and then of course when it was musical or like play season, then all this not all of a sudden, but it'd be tech week and like right after school, they're like, you're gonna be here for 4 hours. We're doing
Oh, wow.
dancing and whatever. And then I
Wow.
go home and be like, don't talk to me, mom. I gotta go sleep. I'm dead. Uh, but it was great. But I don't think I want to be that busy again.
At what point during your high school years did you realize you wanted to go to college?
Pretty much right from the get-go. Because it was already being like my mom and I were talking about it in middle school. I knew like academics was my jam. So I was like, okay, you're good here, you'll be fine there. And also, if we're thinking like back in the day, which sounds so funny to say, but I feel like I'm old now. So like at least I feel oldish, was that the push was I'm a millennial, so the push was go to college, get your degree, go work, that kind of deal. And so
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was readily pushed. And so I think that was probably influential in terms of my wanting to go to college. And I
Hmm.
knew because at that time I wanted to do voice and perform that I was going to have to go to college and likely go through, get my bachelor's and probably get a master's in vocal performance. Obviously, that didn't happen, but it's fine. But I knew at that time I was going to need to do that in order to get closer to my life goals.
Absolutely. Who did you speak with about your desire to attend college?
It was mainly with my teachers and counselors at my high school, probably more so my teachers, just because most of us know that work in ed that counselors have a lot of students. So I pretty much spoke with teachers. They were like, Kellyann, where are you going? What are you doing? And I'm like, hold your horses. I know, like I got it. Um, but I think that was a big part of it. And the friends that I was around were college bound as well. So I think that helped too, because we're all talking about like, where are you going to go? What are you going to do? What have you done thus far? And things like that.
Wow. Did this conversation also transition over to mom? Were you talking to mom about college?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Totally. Like, she was like, okay, where are you going? You better figure this out. And I'm a first gen student. And so she was like, you have to figure it out, Kellyann. Go talk to your counselors. If that counselor won't help you, go see another counselor. And let me tell you, I did. Those poor counselors, like I had one and he was not very present. And so I went to the next. She was like the best one. Everyone loved her. And so I went to her and I said, I don't think I'm ready to do what I want to do. Just tell me, like, give me 3 or 4 things to get started and I'll get going. And she was like, I got you. And I think because I wanted it and I had the drive, it wasn't like, oh my gosh, now I'm taking on student 305. And like, so when I knew that I wasn't going to get the support from my specific counselor, I was like, okay, I'm just going to seek it from somewhere else. And she helped me. And then, but my mom literally was like, we have the internet, figure it out, look it up. You're not dumb. And albeit at that time, I was like, I don't know why you can't just tell me. And I'm like, because she couldn't. So she didn't know. And so she was like, you have resources, use them. And I will say she was good with that. She was like, if that counselor doesn't work, talk to someone else. You love this teacher, go ask them what they did and see what they can help you with. And I will say, and teachers are pretty receptive to that, especially when students are like, I know what I want. Can you help me get there? And they'll usually, as long as, they like students and their jobs, will be like, hey, this is where you can go to get started, but it's still on you to do what you need to do.
Absolutely. I had a previous guest, Sam Blanco III, who
Yeah.
was a COE board chair, and he equated college process to a cake. And because you're a first gen student, did that process very much feel like baking a cake without the instructions?
Yes, I think that's a really good representation. Go Sam. Because yeah, you don't really know. You know that there's things out there, but in terms of where you find those things are a different story. And albeit we live in this world of like we've got a computer in our hand all the time,
Right.
doesn't mean that you know how best or effectively to navigate that computer. And so I will agree. It is pretty much like that, because then all of a sudden you'll be somewhere and you'll be like, why do I have rubber duckies for a cake when it doesn't even apply?
Right.
That was like a silly thing, but like it can
Totally. Yeah.
be, it can kind of take one that would increase take extra time that doesn't need to be made if there's already the know-how to do it.
Absolutely.
And we see that as trio professionals, first gen professionals, things like that, where you're like, oh, there's steps and it doesn't have to be hard.
Right. So my next question to you is the response you got from your community, your counselors, your mom and the people that you were talking about college, what was their response? Was it more unsurprised that you wanted to go to college? It also sounded like mom was already kind of from the get-go. She's like, you're going
Yeah.
regardless.
Yeah. So it was pretty much you're gonna go. Uh and you need to figure out what you're doing. The whole idea
Yeah.
of transferring or changing majors was not super like talked about. And in terms of the ease, because I did change majors and it was not that big of a deal. It's a piece of paper. So I think it was just you use resources, figure out what you need to do. She was like, I'll support you. It wasn't ever like she just like hung me out to dry or anything like that.
Sure. Yeah.
She was just like, okay, so you figured out who you need to talk to. Do we need to go talk to them? I'm like, yes. And then she'd be like, okay, let's figure out either how to get you there or I'm coming. And my mom was a pretty active participant um throughout the whole point, like throughout the whole journey. So she knew, and I'm like, I've told my mother pretty much everything. Like that's what happens when you grow up with a single mom. Like you guys know each other and know pretty much everything about each other. So um
Hmm.
she was just like, let's go, let's figure out how you're gonna do it. But she did always say like the onus was on me, which
Hmm.
um I think is an important skill to have just in general. That if you want it, you better figure out what you're going to do because it's your life and other people aren't going to be like, oh, we'll do it for you.
Hmm.
It's usually a personal endeavor that you have to go through and experience.
Absolutely. What colleges made your list?
Because I was like going into music and a music major at the time, not only do you have to apply and get accepted, you also have to audition and get
Oh yeah, there
accepted.
is an audition process, right? For most
Yes.
colleges.
Yes.
Wow.
So especially like if you're going to enter like like the music,
Hmm.
you have to be not only accepted to the college, but also to the music programs. And so I applied to UNC because they've always been like a notoriously awesome music school, especially like for musical theater, CSU, and then Metro. And I will say, between those three, CSU was my top because I really was impressed by their opera program. UNC would have been fine too. But it was likely going to be either of those two schools. I went through auditions at all three, got accepted to all three, and then I chose to go to CSU. Now, did I transfer? Yes. But at that time, I was like, I'm ready to go. Let's go sing opera. And
Yeah, yeah.
went to CSU.
So talk about that transfer because when students usually choose a college, they end up either staying at the college, majoring in the program. Some students report going to the college feeling disillusioned, but they force themselves to just go through it. What was your decision behind your transfer?
Well, so I initially was going to stay at CSU and finish through.
Hmm.
Um, However, my main goal was to do vocal performance.
Hmm.
And when you enter music college, you don't start there. So most either enter as like a Bachelor of Arts of Music or most do music ed. And I have loved my music teachers my entire existence, but I did not want to teach music. I
Hmm.
wanted to perform it.
Hmm.
And so they were like, you gotta wait, you gotta get, through your freshman year. And I think I was into my sophomore. Yeah, I was in my sophomore year. And I talked to my voice professor, and she's awesome. Love her. Still friends on Facebook. And she said, hey, you need to talk to the head of the department.
Hmm.
And I said, okay. So I scheduled an appointment with the head of the department and I said, this is what I want to do. What do I need to get there? And like, I've been expressing this is what I want. How come there's no discussion about how to get me to a vocal performance major?
Hmm.
And the department head looked at me and said, "You're not good enough to be a vocal performance major."
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that.
Now I will say when that happened, I literally bawled. I remember I called my mom and I bawled and I was like, why did I get accepted to this college if I'm not even good enough to be here?
Mhm.
And so I will say that was pretty transformative. And I said, well, okay, like I specifically went to CSU to do that.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so I'm sure it's more expensive now, but back then it was like $7K per semester.
Mhm.
And like it was about an hour and a half from home. And I didn't have a car. I was riding my bike everywhere already. I was doing all the things. And I said, like if you guys aren't going to let me do what I came here to do, then I don't think that this is the best place for me to be. So I remember after that, it was the next week and I had vocal lessons because you have voice lessons every week. And I told my voice professor and I said, listen, I met with her. This is what she said. And I said, listen, I don't think this is where I'm supposed to be. If I'm not going to be able to at least try for what my main goal at that time was, then there's no point to be here. I
Mhm.
think I made her cry. Because I did love her. Like I had so much fun singing with her and none of it was on her. She was a fabulous and still is a fabulous voice instructor. But pretty quickly after that, I finished out the semester, um, took care of stuff. My mom was like, you might as well go to Metro. And I was like, perfect. So, uh, my mom came up and we did it in horrible weather and
Oh no.
packed it's winter in
In
Colorado.
the middle of winter. Oh my gosh,
Yeah,
yeah.
I did it at the end of first semester or fall semester. And thank you, Mom, for going on wild shenanigans with your crazy daughter. So we packed my mom's, she has like a covered like Toyota. And so we threw all my stuff in it and trekked on home. And this is just a silly story to add into it because, like I had said, I was riding my bike and walking at CSU while I was there the whole time.
Mhm.
And because I was like, I'm not gonna I'm okay. I don't need a car. I'll live.
Mhm.
And I remember we had pulled into the driveway and I said, what? Why is there another car? And my mom handed me a set of keys. And my mom said, thank you for moving home. I got you a RAV4. And
Oh.
I had to pay her back for the RAV4, which is fine. But
Mhm.
it that was pretty much what turned into why I transferred. And looking back now, it was a blessing in disguise. And I got to do such cool, like CSU is massive.
It's a huge
And
school, yeah.
and like class sizes were insane. And not to say that it was bad or anything at CSU. I liked my experience there. But I will say having gone from massive, like huge campus, massive class sizes, then to Metro State, where there's like 20, maybe 20 people in a classroom.
Mhm.
And I could like have relationships with my professors, like, hey, what's going on? And then they check on things and that kind of deal.
Mhm.
It was such a huge change and welcomed. So
Right on.
that's pretty much was my transfer story. And I'm
Wow.
glad I did it. Still continued. I was going to continue music at Metro. And then I think like I was just too shattered. And
Mhm.
I said, like, let's just switch to a minor because I didn't want to waste those credits. And so I switched to a minor and then changed my degree to psychology and I got to do such cool stuff. So I'm always the proponent, like things happen for a reason, even though you may not see it in that time.
So let's briefly talk about that, or take as
Sure.
much time as you want to talk about this part. Because when you transferred, you decided to make music your minor to finish out the credits, but you ended up switching to psychology. Can you talk to us about that change? Because that for someone looking on the outside, right, they would go, "Oh my gosh, from music to psychology, something shifted, something major happened." Can you talk to us about that?
Sure. So as you know, and most of us that work in like college access, you have to take your like certain classes as part of your major. And though you can choose them, but they're like arts, humanities, etc. And so I said, you know what? Let's just take a psychology class. So I was in that big old hall taking a psychology class, and I loved it.
Mm.
And albeit it was like Psych 101, so it was not like anything specific, but I was like, wait, people study this? And I'm like,
Mm,
humans are
yeah.
pretty cool, and they're always going to evolve. So there will always be studying people.
Hmm.
And that's just my, okay, how can I make sure I have job security? And, how weird is that to think of when you're in college? But I was like, okay, this is what I can then hopefully morph and do whatever. So that was pretty much like the kickoff of why I was like, you know what are you going to do then if you're not going to study music? And I was like, psychology is pretty dang cool. And
Hmm.
so that's what pretty much took me into that one. And so I was like, okay, be a psych major. And I will say I loved all my psych classes except one, um, which was statistics.
Ah, yeah. Yeah.
That I struggled with, but everything else I loved. Like abnormal psych was probably one of my favorites, and just learning about different things and how humans and things work. And
Hmm.
I think like music is a language, but I think so is that of psychology. And I think that's where I kind of tied, not so much tied the two together because it didn't need to be tied. Um, but like music is like a language of feeling and emotions, and psychology is kind of like how do those emotions come to be,
Right.
and how does the brain function with those?
Can you talk to us about your college experience at Metropolitan State University? What was new for you? Did that college meet your expectations?
Oh, heck yes. Um, I I will say I am so glad I transferred there. I'm so glad I learned how to take the light rail and not be scared. Because if you've been in downtown Denver, it is very, very congested. There are a ton of people. Parking is outrageous. But I chose that college, and I think because I already had some familiarity with it because I had auditioned there. So I had visited it and been there. Um, at the time, and it's probably still pretty inexpensive, it was probably the cheapest, like 4-year good college to go to. Because at that time it was Metro State Univer or MSUD. So it was, or actually it changed. It was a college and then it changed to university. But I went, um, I went there. It was close to home. Was there influence from my mother? Yes, because she was like, please just be close so then I don't have to worry about you. And it was great. So it allowed me to work the schedule around where I needed to go. Um,
Hmm.
and then the commute wasn't like horrible. And then that way I could work part-time, which at the time was Target. So I literally would just get up early. I did all my classes early on in the day, so like 8 a.m. classes because I'm crazy. And then so I would get up super early because you have to drive to the light rail station, get on the light rail, go through all the stops, and then it would stop right at the front of the college, which was awesome. And then just go do classes all day, get back to my side of town, and then head straight to Target and go work. And so um it was it was a great experience. I'm glad I transferred. I loved that campus. Um it was beautiful. It was like how if you've ever been to Central Park, that's kind of what that kind of campus makes me think of, because it's like there's everything around, but once you're on the campus, it's like the other parts of the world don't exist. Like it's quiet. Like it could be different now, but like it was super quiet once you were on the campus, but you could still kind of hear the bustle of the city.
So you majored in psychology. How did you find yourself in this program? Because you said you took a class at CSU, and then when you transferred over to Metropolitan State, was there more classes that you decided like, oh, this is going to be my major? Were you looking at classes that were very interesting? What sold you on psychology?
So I will say, like, one of the first classes I took was psychology of sexuality, and it was probably also the professor, because she was great at, like, I initially was like, okay, cool, I'll be like a couples therapist or something like that. And like, or even like, they don't really do it so much anymore, but it was like sex education, things like that. And so like I was like, this is super cool. And it just happened to be like, I think like the classes I took, it was just more and more interesting. And I was like, I kind of said, oh, I don't know if this will be okay. And I'm like, this was really freaking cool. And so like, I think I would just hear something, and you talk to colleagues or things like that, like classmates, I guess we would call them. And then I'd hear about what they were doing, and I'm like, wait, that's what you're doing in that one? Like, that's super cool. And I think it just kind of became like, once I got the bite, like, I was like, what else can I learn? That's super cool. What's the next one? Let's go. Let's fill up this major, like, obviously with the things that I needed to do, to earn all my credits necessary, but like, how can I do it so that it's for me and not just checking off a box?
Right. What did you learn about yourself?
Ooh, I would say that in terms of what I learned about myself was that, I was eager to try new things, learn new things, albeit I might struggle. And I'm trying to think too, because my psych classes, like, that's prescribed and that kind of deal, but you also have your gen eds. I will say what I learned about myself was that sometimes, even though you may think that a class will be boring, it'll probably be easier than what you decide to take, which it was awesome. So like, segue, I took World of Islam for my history class. Now, I learned that that is a higher level class for history majors.
Oh.
Okay, I just thought it sounded cool. So I took it. I took it to fulfill my gen ed.
Sure.
And it was the hardest gen ed class I had ever taken. I struggled. But like, I think it taught me, like, I could try new things and it was okay, and the world didn't end, and that I could do hard things, and that it was okay. Now, I will say that that World of Islam class was very hard. I read the Quran. That was cool. I didn't need like, and when you read when you read different things and you learn about different things, it opens your worldview.
Certainly.
And I think that's also what it taught me, was like, don't just sit where you are. There's more things beyond of where your little circle is. And that it doesn't mean then you have to subscribe to that religion or that thought process, but that you could learn and explore and like feel and sit in with what other people are feeling, so that, like when they say like to walk in other people's shoes. I feel like that was like, go experience stuff. It doesn't mean you have to do it forever, but if you can experience and see it, then you will have that lived experience.
Absolutely. We're going to take a moment to reflect on this little question, because You have two different college experiences with CSU and with Metropolitan State. Can you compare those two versus your involvement slash extracurriculars during high school? And,
Ooh.
what were the major differences?
So let me see. So CSU, like my extracurriculars, when you're a music major, you have to go to performances all the time. You're performing. So that was probably more closely aligned to what I was doing in high school, just because it was required as part of the program. And then in terms of Metro, because it is a commuter college university now, that wasn't as, it's not so much that it wasn't readily available because there was always stuff on campus to do, but it
Hmm.
meant that you then needed to make a concerted effort to do it.
Ah.
So, albeit like I said, I literally would just get up, go to college, and essentially come home. There was an opportunity where I said, like, you have resources at your fingertips here. You can experience things you've not experienced. And then that's when I saw a paper on a bulletin board that said, join salsa classes.
Oh, nice.
And I said, okay, why not? And so I said, okay, let's do it. I don't think it was for credits. I think it was just, you would use your health and fitness, whatever. You pay for it, so you might as well use it. And so I just started showing up to salsa classes on campus
Hmm.
and learning and dancing. And as part of it, like you'd go through all these classes and they'd take you to or they wouldn't take you, you'd meet everyone at a salsa club, and then you'd essentially put what you learned into practice, into an experience. Um, and so I think it's just more so like I didn't do as much. I just chose to specific things that I really wanted to do. Uh,
Hmm.
but yes, I was now, albeit like I was working and dancing and doing school, and I was still having to do like some choir stuff as part of my minor.
Sure, sure.
Um, but so yes, was I still like running around and doing all the things? Yes, but it wasn't as extensive as high school and or even when I was at the beginning of my CSU experience.
Can you talk about the moment you graduated from college? What was that moment like for you and for your mom?
Sure. So in terms of like when I graduated, um, so like, and we're talking specifically high school or college?
College graduation.
College. Okay, sorry, I got a little lost.
Oh, no,
Um,
no, you're good.
so for college, I think like I was kicking butt. I'm pretty sure I graduated early because I graduated in December. So, um, I I was ready to go, and I know sometimes for people at towards the end, that's when they're like, I'm tired, we're just gonna slow down. I think I was just ready to go. And I was taking like 15 to 16, 17 credit hours each semester. I was ready
Mm.
to go. And I think that was just part of um, the drive to just get going and start lifing. Um, so um it just kind of went and kept going, and my mom was like, okay, you're at the end, you're good. You made sure you can graduate on, make sure everything was met to be able to graduate. And I said, yeah, I said, I think I'm going to be done in December. And
Oh.
she goes, okay, is there anything wrong with that? I was like, no. And I think they had like a December like graduating walking class. I think I did that then. I don't remember walking in May, so I'm pretty sure I walked in December. And so I just kept trekking and made sure everything was good to go and finished and just went to the finish line.
Amazing. So, were you immediately employed after? Were you already employed? Were you already working somewhere when you finished your degree?
Okay, so yes. So I was working part-time at Target, and I had already been there for quite a long time. And they were like, hey, they were pretty much like, say, you should just go into management. And I was not opposed to that at the time. Back in the time it was around the recession. So like having a job that paid you 40K right out of
Not
college,
bad. Not bad.
mom.com. And so um I I'm trying to think like how the timeline happened because I was working there
Sure. Yeah.
and then I'm pretty sure I entered an internship program. Yeah, I must have been doing that while I was in my last year of college. Things start to run together as you get older. And so I was, they were like, okay, so once you finish this internship program and you're done and you graduate with your bachelor's, then you'll go on to be a manager. So, and I was like, okay, I was a psych major. You use psychology and everything. So in terms of applicability, that wasn't a big deal. And so once I finished the internship and then I got placed or I got to choose my store and then I worked there for a little while and then I realized I was not cut out for it at all.
Mm-hmm. Talk about finding out that you don't like something or just doesn't gel with you.
So I think a part of it was being really young. I was early 20s. I think what I expected versus what it really was were two different things. And I will say, like, I was not good at my job at Target. Um, I think I likely overthought it, and I see. I think it was just mainly like growing pains, like as far as like results and things like that. Because I remember like the feedback they would give me, and now looking today, I was like, but I'm really good at those things. So I don't know. I don't know if it was just like learning and growing over years and figuring stuff out, which is likely what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But I was not good at that job. They were about ready to boot me.
Oh.
When you know, you can usually feel it. And I literally like I got super sick. I was sick the whole time I worked there. Then I had my gallbladder removed. Like your body tells you things.
Mm-hmm.
And I was super stressed. And I remember I went and cried to my mom and I was like, I can't do this. I feel horrible. I haven't eaten. Because when you have like gallbladder issues, like eating is very painful. So I didn't eat for a long time. And so like that probably didn't help with the stress. Like you're not
Mm-hmm.
eating, I couldn't sleep. And so then like, performance was already going, like work performance was going down the tubes. And so I did that for a very, very, very short time. And um my boss there, I don't think they liked me there anyway.
Mm.
If you've been in like work cultures where you can just tell that you're not going to be part of the group, then you feel it and you know it. And I'm not good at being super because you obviously have to be professional, but I couldn't pretend to
Sure.
be who they wanted me to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just remember I was like, Mom, I feel horrible. And I had gotten my first apartment. I was like, I'm rocking and rolling, doing really good. Um, during that time, because it was like the stock market crash and all that jazz.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom was like, listen, you look like crap with love. And you're
Yeah.
sad and you're upset all the time. And she goes, no job should ever make you feel that way. And
Mm-hmm.
and I said, well, I won't have my apartment and I'll have to move back home. And she said, that's fine. And so that's what I did. So albeit it was very short-lived and yes, it seemed good at that time. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
it was just not meant for me and that's okay. Um, and like I, I thought at that point like it was a major failure, but it was just a pivot. And I'm glad I don't work in retail working 70 hours a week. Like it was a blessing in disguise because
Oh, for
albeit
sure.
I
For
work a
sure.
lot for my like career that I do in Trio, this is way more fulfilling, way more like heart filling than anything that I ever did, at least in that capacity.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So in that time while you were working with Target, were you already thinking about obtaining your master's?
Yes, I had actually started my master's while I was at Target because
Oh,
they had
wow.
the
Awesome.
tuition reimbursement or
Uh-huh.
something. And so I was like, cool, Target's gonna pay for my master's. So now I had to specifically choose something that was aligned with Target or, like management-esque in order for them to pay for it.
For
And then
sure.
that's why I chose organizational leadership as my master's degree.
Wow. So, and talk a little bit about, or as much as you want,
Sure.
on the master's program that you decided to, or the institution that you decided to attend for this, because you were a busy professional, it sounds like. So you didn't have a lot of time during or even after work or before.
No. Um, no. This goes to I think I'm Superwoman and I can do all things. And I think that part of it was like, I knew I was super busy, but I I figured out how to balance stuff when I was in my undergrad and I was busy then and I was busy in high school. So why couldn't I do it this way too? Um, and so I said, okay, you're going to need to have an online program because you have to go to work. They're not going to say, okay, you can go to class at 4. That's not how retail works.
Right, right,
Um,
right.
and when you are in your big kid job, as I call it, like most of the time, like the expectation is that you are dedicated to your job for that full 8 to 10 hour shift. And then you need to do other stuff outside of it. So I said, okay, I'm going to need to have I'm going to need to choose a reputable online state institution that I know would count.
Hmm.
We've heard about the other stuff in terms of things not so much counting, but like not being super legitimate. So I wanted to make sure that I didn't waste my time or my money because at that time it was Target's money. And so I just did some research and I said, okay, cool. They have an organizational leadership program. And I said, that's pretty much in line with that. And I was like, oh, and then it'll apply to other stuff afterwards because goes through everything. And
Hmm.
so um I said CSU Global was there. It was and still is like affordable as far as like a master's program is concerned.
Hmm.
And so that's how I started there. And I loved that experience too.
That's wonderful. Can you talk a little bit about more about the CSU on the CSU Global as the online program? Because for a lot of busy professionals, they end up looking toward a degree that lines up with their career goals. Does this master's degree line up to what you currently do?
Yes. And I am glad that when I was like younger, I said, okay, let's do leadership. Because um that's essentially what I do. Like I've been on the board and that's leadership. In my role as a director, I'm leading my staff and my students and things like that. And so it's still applicable. Uh,
Hmm.
in terms of that experience, that was my first time taking online classes because for my undergrad, I specifically did in person.
Hmm.
And I said, you should be fine. Like you'll figure it out. And so um I I pretty much I think I was taking because they're accelerated classes. I don't remember if they're 8 it was like 8 or 9 weeks maybe.
Hmm.
But because it was a trimester setup. So there were 3 terms within the trimester, one right after the other, and then there was an overlapping term. Um that you could do. And so for the most part, I did 2 and 2 class. So I would do 2 classes for this term, and then right after I would take the next 2 classes. But sometimes I would say, you know what, this is a light class. We'll take what was I taking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 classes at the same time?
Oh,
Or no,
wow.
1, 2, 3. It was 3. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, but
This
still,
master's.
still, that's a
One, two,
lot.
three. My bad. Getting confused. So yeah, so I would do one master's class right back to back, and then sometimes I would tack on the third. So that wasn't horrible, but I would essentially be in 3 classes at one time for 4 weeks.
Wow.
But I didn't do that very often because, like you said, when you're working and you're trekking, that's a lot to um tackle and get through. And so I had
Absolutely.
started at when I had started that while I was in Target. Now, then once I quit, like I didn't get tuition reimbursement. So I said, well, girl, you're going to finish this. So I started taking loans. And I was in Pennsylvania at the time, running a campus bookstore, still hella busy. And running a store. And so like after work, I would just say, okay, your discussion is due on Thursday. So you have to do the prep before that. I had a paper due every week. So I would make sure I partition time and say, okay, Friday is when you do your edits. And then Saturday, way before the midnight deadline, I would submit. So, I really liked having like gone through and done an online program. It's not as scary as you think. You do have support. And I also worked on the back end of that as an advisor, but that was later. But like as long as you do what you need to do, seek help when you need it, you can do it. But I think also because it is an online program, like you need to be able to set yourself to a schedule and hold yourself to that schedule, or else time can run away from you, deadlines can run away. And once you're in your master's, like if you don't have your stuff together, like the professors are like, okay, cool, like we're here for the people who want it, but that's on you. So if you don't take care of business, that's not our problem. But yeah, so I loved it. It was great. I finished in the allotted time I expected, which was 2 years. And yeah, just got through it. And I did really, like I said, I really love school. Now, I don't know if I want to do any more, but I do really love school.
Now, you've shared already that you've done a lot of retail positions, Target, you
Yeah.
ran bookstores,
Mhm.
and in the middle of all that, you switched into advising, which is in higher education. That's quite a shift. Um, what was your educational experience in that, and is this the field you envisioned yourself being in?
Oddly, yes. I I didn't know it was going to be Upward Bound, and I didn't know it was going to be a grant, but I kept saying, you're going to be a director.
Doesn't
One day
happen
you're
until
going
it
to be,
happens.
yeah, it'll happen when it happens, it'll come. But I kept saying, I was like, I'm going to be a director. Now, I will
Mm,
say, I didn't have that feeling or foresight like at Target or running a campus bookstore, but it did
sure,
kind of
sure.
start because you're on a college campus. So I
Hmm.
was on a private college campus for a majority of that. And, like, albeit I was running a store and whatever, I was working with departments, seeing what departments were doing, and I was like, that's really cool.
Hmm.
And that kind of deal. And so I was like, that might be where my next career path would go. And so I had worked in Pennsylvania running a campus bookstore, and then I wanted to go home, so like an opportunity opened up. So then I went to a store in Colorado,
Hmm.
and then another bookstore company bought out the bookstore. And I literally said, Kellyann, you can either continue to do this or this can catapult you to go into higher ed, which you've been talking about for years. And
Hmm.
so, albeit I was going to be losing my job, I said, okay, if this is the time. I just said that this is when you're supposed to do it. There's no reason why you have to stay and do this if it's not really your passion. And I
Hmm.
said, you got your master's from CSU Global. Why couldn't you work there?
Hmm.
And so I I just kind of scoured after like mourning the loss of my job, and I said, okay, let's take a peek and a gander and see what they have open. And I said, you're gonna have to start at the bottom because that's how it works. And there was an undergraduate advisor position open, and I applied, interviewed, did the whole shebang, did that for quite some time. And then I moved to New Mexico with my ex-husband at the time, so I could bring my job here, which was great. So I worked as an online advisor while here, and then that's when I then learned about Upward Bound.
Wow. So what did you learn about yourself being an advisor for CSU Global? What is something that you learned that was like, oh my gosh, that was either eye-opening or mind-bending to you about yourself?
I will say it, and I didn't quite see it. It was essentially like people had seen it in me, but I just did it. And I could build relationships with people because it was on email and phone. And I could do that readily, quickly. And I was really good with the at-risk population. And that's not so much like what we do with Trio, because ours is pretty specific, but this was like people who had went to college and dropped out and came back, or they were parents and things like that, or whatever else. And I could connect with them really well. And, you know, my numbers were pretty dang good now because I worked with the at-risk population. They weren't amazing, but um, I I think, and maybe that's probably why, where I am is that I'm really drawn to it. It's a passion for me where I'm like, how can I help you get where you want to be? And let's figure out how I can help you navigate your obstacles to get where you want to be.
Right. I'm going to ask about Trio. We kind of already learned a little bit of how you got into Trio, but I'm going to reframe the question a little
Sure.
bit. Is how did that connection to Trio start for you?
Ooh, like,
Like, what was your touch point? Because you said you moved to Clovis and that's how you learned about Trio,
yeah.
but what was that touch point? Where
Oh,
where was
sure.
that connection?
So, because I was working remotely, I was lonely. Okay. I was in my house and I was like, this sucks. So I need to build community. I can't do this. And so, I looked up like tutoring jobs because I was like, you can do that. You have a master's, like you're fine. And it'd likely be high school. Like you'll be okay. And you'll be paired with the stuff you can do and that kind of deal. And
Sure.
I was looking online and it said Upward Bound tutor. And I said, well, that's interesting. Not really sure what it is, but you might as well just apply and see what happens. And started doing that. And I talked to my bosses and I said, hey, like I'm lonely and I'm about to quit this job. I need to get some like community or like get out of my house. And so I was like, hey, can we move my hours around so I can tutor on Tuesdays and Thursdays? So I moved my hours around and I started tutoring at the high school for the Upward Bound program. And I got to hang out with cool students, staff, and learn about, and that's pretty much how I learned about Trio. Because albeit it was around and I probably would have been able to benefit from it, I did not hear or know anything about it while I was younger. And so uh, I was started tutoring and working with the kids, and I live in a military town, so people come and go all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
And the director, her husband was PCSing, and the staff was like, you have a master's, Kellyann, you can run the grant. And I said, but I've never run a grant. And and they said, but you could do it. But I was like, but I also have this job. And they were like, so you could get this job. And I said, I guess I could. And that's pretty much how I came to be where I am now. I will say, like, I thought on it for a long time. And I was like, okay, career rise, what does this look like? Is this where I want to be? Who knew? Because but till before then, I didn't really know what a grant director did. And that's pretty much how I learned about Trio and got into Trio.
Wow, that is amazing. So you already talked about a little bit about your motivation to apply. Um, but can you tell me a little bit about like what sold you into wanting to be a director for the Upward Bound program? Because obviously you learned that the previous director was leaving. What finally said, I'm just gonna jump in and apply because I feel like I have all the qualifications. What made you do that?
Uh, it was the staff, and one of them is still on staff with me. He's been here longer than me. Uh, there was little birdies. That's what I'm gonna call him. He was a little birdie.
Very good.
Uh, hey, you know, you really like this and you do this well with the kids. This would be great. Da-da-da-da-da. And they wouldn't stop. Little birdies. It
Little
was
birdies.
the work study, him, and then I think there was one other tutor or something, and they were like, you could do this. And then the director was pushing that too. And they just kept saying it, and I was like, well, okay. And then at the time, you know, talked to whom I was with and that kind of deal, and be like, okay, this is a big, some semi big life change. And I said, okay, why not? And I think the biggest thing was my worry about failure,
Mm,
and like what does that look like?
sure, sure.
And I think that's for anyone who starts a new endeavor, a new job, like there's always worry about failure, and then you have to decide and determine if you're going to let that failure stop you or push you. And I said, well, applying and interviewing isn't going to hurt. You might as well just go try. And um I hadn't done a panel interview in a very long time. And I will say that I was so nervous. That was the scariest interview of my entire life. In front of like, you know, uh, VPs and things like that. Now that I know them, like, it's a different story now. And I'm like, why were you such a chicken pants? But I think it's just I wanted to do well, and I was nervous about saying the right things. And I remember one of the people on the panel said, but you've never run a grant. And I said, why doesn't that mean I can't learn?
Mhm.
And I think that's always been my thing. Like, you can learn everything. Um, as long as you put the like do the work that you need to do so that you can learn it, and persevere. And that's pretty much what I told them. I said, well, I'm going to have to ask a lot of questions. I'm going to have to probably talk to a bunch of other directors and just jump in and do it. And so I'm glad I got accepted, and I've been here since 2017. And I will say my first year was extraordinarily difficult. um I struggled a lot. I learned a lot. I cried a lot. And I think it's also because I have perfectionistic tendencies. So if things didn't go specific to how I perceived them to be or whatever, then it was like, oh my gosh. And I literally would be like, I'm getting fired tomorrow. Like, I literally was just a nervous wreck. And I think it's because I wanted to do so well. And it's
Mhm.
a blessing and a curse at the same time.
Sure thing. Sure
Um,
thing.
but um that's pretty much how I came into it, and I've been here ever since.
Well, first off, congratulations on getting the job. And you've been around for 7 years, so you must be doing something right, right?
I think so, or else they would have booted me.
What is something that struck you immediately about the Trio Upward Bound program? What stuck out?
um I will say it's the support and care that is provided for upward bound students. It's more than like, we obviously have markers and things that we need to meet, but um it's very much like holding students where they are, while also saying you can do and be so much more than you don't even know.
Hmm.
And um I think it's like, as we help our students grow, we also grow. um so I think that's a big part of it, is just like holding, supporting, moving forward. Granted, like some students are more driven than others. Some of them just need a little spark, need help to get the spark going. But you know, they're they're all students that have dreams just like I did it, you know, and do at some point. And how can I help nurture that? While also giving them the wherewithal, because I'm like, I can't do that. A lot of that is intrinsic and things like that, but how can I provide the encouragement, support, and resources so that they can then achieve even more than they ever thought that they could do?
Absolutely. What were some of your goals for the program?
Um, so we're still working on like I would like to increase student participation, as most programs have felt like students are just they're checked out. Heck, I get it. I'm tired. I'm checked out sometimes too. We've been through pretty big events life-wise, and it's tiring. So I would like to increase student participation, like how many are coming to events and things like that. I try to find cool things and fun things that are different and new for students to be able to experience. I want to provide opportunities for students to grow as leaders, whether that's like look up leadership conferences, things like that. I took students to that. I think it was last year. That was fabulous. I also helped run it, so I was impartial. But and then I think in terms of like one last like goal is figuring out how to gamify, and it's hard enough trying to keep my attention on things, but like as far as students, like there's so many distractions and so many things happening, and brains like are everywhere. So like we've seen and implemented a lot of like games and things as far as learning to keep engagement up. So my goal is to keep looking for fun and cool things, and um switching things up and getting feedback from my students, especially on like what they want to see and what they want to do and experience, so that in hopes it's, you know, they're tied into it and they have the buy-in to do the things that we need to do.
Absolutely. You already talked about your first year a little bit, where you talked about that it was very hard. It was learning about the program, learning about how to manage a grant. But what did that experience, that first year, teach you about the program and yourself at that point?
So in terms of what it taught me about the program, is that, um, and I think this is what's really cool is like we have the ability and the creativity to meet the set goals. I don't have to do a specific, like there's not a specific line in a book that says this is what you have to do
Right.
to do this. And I really like that. I think that feeds my creative spirit, is like, okay, how are we going to do this to get to here? Or how does this tie into this that then is beneficial for student experience, learning, etc. Um, and then in terms of like for me and myself, um, I would say it it taught me that I think like about advocacy and like how best to advocate for my students, because I will say that I have pushed back a lot to my institution. It's all within regulations. But I will say I was like, if I learned stuff at a conference or I was looking through regs and it said I could do this, but I was getting pushback, I was a very staunch advocate in order to do things. And um I have heard my feedback was that I was very loud, but the thing is that if I know that it's within the regulations, it's allowed and it helps serve my students, then I will be loud and I will be persistent. Um, I'll do it kindly and I'll do it respectfully, but if I know that it's going to benefit my kids, then I'm going to make sure that that happens. And, uh, it, and I think that's a part of like tied back to like being brave and make, making, it's not so much like, it's like feeling the comfort and the uncomfortable. And, you know, and it wasn't so much like I, I pushed back quite a bit, and, some people didn't like it, and that's okay. But, it allowed me to do cool stuff with my kids that the previous directors were possibly not ever allowed to do. Like, I've taken my staff to so much PD, professional development. Like, I want them to grow. I want them to learn. And, that wasn't really, I don't want to say not made available, but I don't think it was shared like, this is something for you. This is something you can do. And I literally at the beginning of every year tell my staff, I'm like, okay, we're skipping SWASAP this year, for state conference. You're going, then this next year we'll all go to this. And so like, and a part of that was that we were still being as upward bound to the 4% for PD. And I was like, that doesn't apply to us. And having to have a lot of pushback about that. But I was like, I know my regs, I know my legs, and I want my staff to stay. They have, you know, like at least for Joseph, I have a newer staff person on, but I'm like, he's been here this long. I want him to be able to learn and grow. Like, I was able to promote him. Like, I want, like, if you have staff and they're there and they want to grow, if you can, as a director, help that, and you have to advocate and push back, then do it. And that goes for your students as well. It's totally worth it.
So you've been at this position for 7 years already.
Yeah.
What is your favorite memory from the 7 years that you served as director?
Ooh, see, this is hard because with Upward Bound, you take your kids on trips. I think my favorite memory, albeit it was the most stressful and scary, was my first summer trip. We had so much carryover. I had to spend so much money.
Oh yeah, you have to get rid of it. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to get through it, but you also have to do it like you know, it has to be allocable and all those
Absolutely.
terms and
Right.
phrases we know.
Right.
And so it was brought up and they were like, Kellyann, you should take them to Las Vegas, Nevada. And I said, you know,
Oh.
it's in Las Vegas, right?
I wouldn't immediately picture like a high school trip to Las Vegas. Like that would be the first thing I would think of.
Yeah, nope. And, but I was like, okay, like, and I don't know if it was like as a test for me to see if I would sink or swim. I don't know, but I was like, oh, I'm ready to swim. Let's go.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
And I will say that was the largest trip I think I'd ever taken of students. I think we had around 30. I'd have to look back at pictures. And it was now like students saw what they'd never seen before. It was parents were well aware, so no, there was meetings. But we like, if you look for stuff, you can find it. And we're going to take our seniors to Nevada for their senior trip this year. Like, there is so much educational stuff. I found so much free stuff. Like, we did awesome, cool things. They had like the bodies in motion at the Excelsior, I think. Like, we got to do such cool things. And I will say that was my, like, part of my favorite memory, albeit it was stressful, is we got to do such cool and different things, and the kids were like, this is insane. And I'm like, it is. Welcome to a big city living. And I think it was also like our jobs, and I see as for me is to expand their world knowledge and their world experience. So albeit we're in a little town, that doesn't mean that then they won't experience different things in different places. And I think it's important for them to have exposure to that so that it's not a shocker. But also, for them to be like, oh, these people live differently from me. It doesn't mean that it's bad or good. It's just different.
Mhm.
And life there is different from where life is at home. Um, and I think as far as like a specific activity, like with kids, was rafting, water rafting.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, I love that. It's great for team building. They have to listen and work with each other. And um uh, it that's like one of my favorite experiences to do with the kids. I think I've taken a group twice. And one, it's water and I love water, but everything I do, I literally think about like, how will this impact students? How will it benefit them in their life now and beyond? And what is also fun because they're teenagers. So I want it
Absolutely.
to
Right.
have a certain fun aspect to it while exposing them to the things that they may not otherwise experience.
Absolutely. You also serve as an executive member for Trio New Mexico, a state association for trio professionals. What have you enjoyed about this association and what have you learned?
And I've loved my time on the board. I did step down early because I went through a major life change and I needed to take care of things.
Mhm.
But and I'm still I'm past president right now. Um it's a because so as president, it's like a 3-year term. So you're president-elect, president, and past president. And so now I'm in my past president's tenure. I entered it a little early, but not too shabby. And like I work with wonderful people. You build such great community because as an association, um, you're working together to accomplish great things. And New Mexico is small, so we're a very small association
Mhm.
compared to like Texas, Louisiana, etc. And so we have to be small but mighty to
Mhm.
get
Mhm.
things done that we need to get done, and we do it very well. I would say I'm a little biased, but I've enjoyed building relationships with people like from all over the state. And I was doing that already, like just as far as like I like to mentor and help and also seek help because you might as well see what's going on around you before you start reinventing the wheel. Uh,
Mhm.
but I really enjoyed the community aspect. We help each other all the time. And if you need something, you just have to ask for it. And most people will already feel and assess that need and help meet that need. Um, and I've learned, um, I think my hardest thing was when I stepped down from the board because I was going through divorce at the time.
Mhm.
And uh what I learned is that sometimes in order to do the best for what you think is best, you sometimes have to choose yourself. And when my life change was happening, it was right around policy seminar, conference, spring, like our spring annual conference. And I was like, it's just too much, Cal. So I will say what I've learned is that sometimes like you have to choose you, although like being part of association is very much like how to like serving others, making sure the whole is taken care of, and um that things that need to be done are taken care of, but that albeit like I had already said, like you built relationships. Like when my when I was going through divorce, I literally called my past president and I was like, so I'm freaking out and I can't do it all.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
this is what I'm gonna do. I can't do it all. And I was very upset about it because I'm not a quitter, but it was essentially like a redirection. And I said, listen, I said, I can't do policy. I can't do the conference. I can't do trio day. Like they're all back to back. And I was just trying to survive. Heck, I was just trying to get my dang APR done
Right, right, right.
through like my personal life changing. So, um, it essentially taught me that sometimes you have to take a step back, but it doesn't mean that you have to completely abandon it. And that's what I told them. I said, just give me a few months to get everything finalized and get my life semi back to equilibrium, not normal, but equilibrium. And now I'm like, okay. So I'm like, okay, I'm doing Eli Committee, Emerging Leaders Institute. And I'm like, ooh, let's go and get rock and rolling. So I feel like um it's just also been a like in terms of learning, like I can call anybody that's on the board, past board, anyone that's working in committees to talk about trio related stuff, life related stuff. And you know, that we're just a very, which I think is a really cool thing for Trio New Mexico, is that we're very like we're really just tied, like cued into each other and support each other readily, whether it is personal, professional. Um, and I just think that's just really, really cool. And I think that's the plus side of like being a part of a state, like a state association. So if you haven't paid your individual membership fee or your institutional, we'd love to have you. We do cool and great things.
Awesome. I like that little plug. Now that you've professionally experienced Trio for a while, you've experienced Upward Bound, and you've learned about other Trio programs, I'm going to ask you kind of an on-the-spot question. What does Trio mean to you?
I would say trio means opportunity. It means, you know, that our students, their families can be supported as well, and that their 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 students are safe with us and they don't have to worry about, like they're always going to worry about their future, but I think with with trio in the way that it is, there's like a security blanket. Like we know what we're doing. We've been doing this for a while, and that's not just like me and my role. Like trio has been around for a very long time. It works. There's statistical data that it works, and um you know that we're here to serve your student, serve your family, and make sure that your goals as a family are met as well. Because I like a lot of my parents are like, I just want my child to have better than I did. And um I hope that through, especially just specifically through my program, that a lot of my students and parents can say that. Um and you know that they're better for having gone through the program.
Absolutely. So as you know, advocacy for TRIO programs is important because they are grant programs. These are programs that are funded every 4 years, every 5 years. What can everyday folks do to continue fighting for these programs to make sure they stay funded?
Of course. So, um, in terms of advocacy, reach out to your local and state reps. You can go to their websites, that you can contact them via email. It's going to go to their staff. It usually doesn't go to them. Um, Specifically, like it's a messaging board. You can call and leave voicemails. Um, and sometimes they'll even come and be in the flesh and be like in person. So if you have the opportunity, and it's not even so much as opportunity, it's a matter of like reaching out and saying, hey, we want to make sure that trio programs are here to stay and are funded to where they need to be funded. So like each year we're usually for policy seminars saying, hey, we need more money, which is true. Life is crazy expensive. I know I've had to make so many cuts to my program personally just to be able to do what we're doing. Because because it's so crazy expensive. Like it just is what it is. But you know, and in terms of like fighting for like for our programs, like talk about us. Like talk about what we do, who we are. Like I said, I didn't know what trio was. That shouldn't be a thing. Um, and like we do a lot of education, myself and my staff, of like, hey, we're one trio program, but there's a whole slew of them. And you know, and I think that's important too, as far as advocacy. I always say, like, once you're a trio kid, you're always a trio kid. Just so they know, like, you're upward bound, next you're going to SSS, and then on the premise you go into grad school, then you'll go on to do McNair. I think it's also just like talking about it, and especially like if you're on your campus, like on your if you're on your campus, you're on your campus. On your campus, like your campus should know who you are, what you do, and then that way, they can send kids your way and that kind of deal. I think that's a big part of advocacy too, is like letting people know who we are and what we are, especially in your communities. Because a lot of people don't know. We know because we're in the throes of it, but a lot of people just don't know really what all of TRIO is. We serve students, but there's also like we got to get money to be able to do that, and then regulations and things to be able to function the best that we can.
Oh, so true. So true. What is one piece of advice you would give to TRIO students who may be listening to this podcast?
Ooh, okay. So one piece of advice I would give to TRIO students is to persist and to do hard things. Like you're gonna experience things that are extraordinarily challenging, and the world will be telling you, you might as well just give up. Like, what does it matter? But your life matters to you.
Mhm.
And it's your life to live, and it's no one else's. And so live it like unapologetically. And, when you hit a wall, which will be one of many, um, get support, get help to break through it. Doesn't mean you have to do it yourself, but, I'll, what you think is like a huge boulder, once you've gone through it and experienced it and it's been years, then you realize it was a pebble. That sounds kind of not fun to say, but perception is reality, and like hindsight is 2020. So, which are very cliche terms, but as you grow older and things like that, is you're gonna have to just go through things that sometimes aren't very fun. But it's also part of our human experience.
What would you like to say to TRIO professionals listening to this podcast?
Ooh, I would say like use your network. I always say like the wheel's already there. You don't need to reinvent it. Now, is it fun to do cool things and different things? Of course. Use your creativity, blossom, grow. But you have your state associations to get support. You have your regional associations and to get national support. I I will like I've had to email COE to get help for my program. Like these these organizations are there for you to support you. You're not alone, by any means. And I know sometimes that we can feel very siloed on our campuses, but that doesn't mean that there aren't people to help you and to help you get unsiloed, if that's even a word,
Absolutely. Yeah.
on your campuses. And we can learn so much from each other. And um, that's why I love conferences, because I go talk to someone from Utah or Colorado and I'm like, wait, how did you do that? Or what does this look like? And um, like we are part of a fabulous and great network that we can then utilize and make our programs nationally better as a whole also, which will be helpful like for those of us that are going through our new grant cycles and sharing, showing the Department of Ed like this is why we're valuable and that we are awesome and we're here to stay.
Absolutely. What is something that you're currently reading, listening to, or watching?
Oh, okay. So I'm a podcast fiend. I literally will just put it on. I'll listen to it while I'm at work. I'll have one AirPod in while kids are coming in and out listening to stuff. Um, and I listen to multiple things because I don't know. I guess I need variety. I don't know. I don't know why. I'm cool with just being chill right now, but I'm listening to two podcasts right now. So One is it's called Eat, Pray, FML. You guys know what that means. I'm in a lot of like podcast divorce stuff and support groups and things like that. Just as like personal life figuring out and that kind of deal. It's
Mhm.
also humorous, so I can have some giggles. And then, like I said, I'm a psych nerd. I'm also listening to Sociopath, a Memoir.
Interesting.
And that is very interesting. I started listening to it on a plane to COE in September. And so they're kind of all over the place. And that's like I listen to a bunch, like I love all audio books, podcasts, book, like anything that tells a story. Is just I just love it. I think that's just my reader nerd in me. And like I said, like I'm in my divorce era, so I'm listening to a bunch of things that are like tied to that. And I love true crime, anything psychology, like Crime Junkie is great too. But you know, you can get true crime on TikTok now too. So it's
Oh,
everywhere.
true. True, true.
And then in terms of music, I love this. Her name is Queen Herbie. And she was part of Carmen back in the day. And
Mhm.
she now performs just her, I think her husband like produces or something. So I'm gonna go to her concert in November.
So
I'm gonna go see Teddy Swims in a couple weeks for like a birthday concert. And
nice.
I just finished watching Yellow Jackets. So I'm all over the place. But you know, like I will be entertained. We have plenty of entertainment sources in our world today.
Absolutely. I hope this podcast makes it to your rotation too.
Oh heck yes. I'm already subscribed. Don't worry.
Well, awesome. Awesome. I love that. Using only one word, describe yourself.
Oh. See, in this one I wasn't sure. But I will say I think I would say boisterous because
I like that. I like that.
I get energy spurts like caffeine. Caffeine is, I just get wild, and it's not even like I'm bad or anything, but I get like super silly and loud and weird sometimes, or my staff will say a lot. But I think it's just, I'm like, life is too short to be like like sad, mad, unhappy for a prolonged amount of time. And I think that's my way to like break myself out of like non-healthy cycles. And that's more so like sadness, you know, thoughts that are not as positive, things like that.
Mhm.
And so like breaking up the monotony of whether it's just life in general or like I said, like thought process or things like that. But I sure keep people on their toes.
That's awesome. I love that. So, Kellyann, it has been a pleasure to speak with you today on this podcast, to learn about your path, to learn about your path into trio, and just learn about a lot of great things about you. And you're doing amazing things out there in Clovis, New Mexico. So thank you so much for being on the pod.
Awesome. Thank you for having me on. It was great to speak with you.
So we have a tradition on the podcast where we have the guests sign off. Do you care to do the honors?
Sure. Hi, this is Kellyann Weber, and I am the director for the Trio Upward Bound program at Clovis Community College in New Mexico. Stay classy, be sassy. Trio works.
Are you a participant, alum, or staff of a Trio program? Do you want your program highlighted? You or your program could be featured in an upcoming episode of Let's Talk Trio. Get a hold of us by going to our Facebook page or Instagram and send us a direct message. Search for Let's Talk Trio. We want to get your story to the public.
That was our guest, Kellyann Weber, Trio Upward Bound Director at Clovis Community College in New Mexico. Thank you so much for being on the podcast and for sharing your trio story. Remember, if you would like to be on the Let's Talk Trio podcast or know a staff, advocate, participant, or alumni, send us an email at letstalktrio@gmail.com. That email again is letstalktrio@gmail.com. A heartfelt thanks to our individual supporters, Angelica Vialpando, Dr. Jamie Motley, Dr. Ryan Barone, Dr. Jeff Nepute, Angelica Valdez, Rosario Riley, Felicia Rivera, Eric LaMaster, and Jaded Electronics. Thank you to our corporate sponsors, TrioJoblist.com, NOSOTROS Education Center, TheTrioStore.com, powered by Proforma. Visit www.thetriostore.com, your source for Trio graduation stores. And StudentAccess. Thank you all so much for your continued support of this podcast. You too can sponsor the Let's Talk Trio podcast in one of three ways. Become a monthly patron on Patreon. Our base level starts at $1 a month. Become a corporate sponsor by placing an ad on the podcast. Contact us for details. Become a supporter with a one-time donation to the podcast PayPal account. Our business handle is @Let'sTalkTrio. I'd like to take a moment to thank our honorary members of the Let's Talk Trio podcast, Roderick Chambers, Tony Ho, Scott Kendall, and Susan Cramp. The Let's Talk Trio podcast team is John Russell, audio engineer, music producer and composer, and post-production editor. Amelia Castaneda, script supervisor, marketing manager, social media manager, and producer. Juan Rivas, executive producer and host. Be sure to follow the Let's Talk Trio podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. This episode was recorded Sunday, October 6th, 2024. Thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you on the next episode.